Yo, what up, and welcome back to Pnoid News. Man, listen, all right, it's Sunday, and I'm gonna tell you what. I'm gonna be honest with you. This here's a Peter Zeihan video, right? It's a new one, legit. It's from like this week, and there is information in the Q&A section, which I mean, it's about 30 minutes into this video. I'm gonna put the link in the description for the video if you don't watch it yourself. That we should all gain new insights from, and it's a way of understanding things, and a light should click in your head. And if it don't, then I'm gonna break it down for you as we go through. I want you to understand that a lot of the things that we think of as movements in America that are positive for, you know what I'm saying, like, women, or positive for, minorities, or whatever the case might be, are really just movements to get individuals into the capital system, and to get individuals into the debt system, and to stand here and hyperdrive your economy. All right. Is an important part of this that a lot of people need to understand, is that American capital structure, right, has changed quite a few times, right? This is version like 3 or 4.0 right now, right? And the first one, you know what I'm saying, was a gold-based currency. The second one was a Keynesian-based economic system where we chased full employment. The third one was the one that lasted from 1972 till 2008, right? Where, you know what I'm saying, like, we stood here and tried to drive down wages. And I want you to understand something, all right? This ideology of having all these civil rights and all the movements for females and divorces and things of this nature, and getting females into the workforce, it's really just about driving your system and your economy higher. The freedom is a byproduct of that. I want you to understand that fully. This is an important ideology to understand, that there's a reason for all this. And you can go back and watch my, you know what I'm saying, the neatest trick the system ever pulled, right, from Ted Kaczynski, to understand all this, right? And Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber. And he said the same thing that I'm trying to tell you right now. So with that being said, let's sit here and, really get into this and have this conversation, because I think it is something that is going to shed a lot of light on stuff that we don't understand. But also, you know what I'm saying, we're going to sit here and, learn some things about, the global economics and global geopolitics as far as things is really concerned. And, that's always important for us to do. So let's rock and roll.
Thank you, Padmaja. Hi, Peter.
Hello. Just tell me when to start.
Are we on?
I'm on. Should I go?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Sorry for that little hiccup here going around the world. Coming to you from Colorado. My job today is to reset the conversation. There's a lot of discussion in the United States about our future in the world. There's a lot of discussion in India about its future as a major power. But we're all working from an understanding that is now 30 to 40 years out of date. So allow me to kind of reset the picture. At the end of World War II, the Americans created a new age, a new order, the first order of the world. In it, we told everyone that we would use our navies to patrol the global oceans so that everyone could go anywhere at any time, interact with any partner, participate in any supply system, bring any commodity home to produce any product, then send it out for export. For the first time in history, you didn't have to do any of that with a military escort, because the Americans took care of it. And that ended the imperial age and brought us globalization and free trade. It worked because it allowed the global system to develop as a containment strategy. We basically created this order. We paid everyone to be on our side. But the Cold War ended 30 years ago. And the Americans have been edging away from that system ever since. And without that security parameter of the Soviet foe, the Americans lost interest in maintaining the free trade order. Now, let's assume for the moment that the Americans decide that they want to carry this forward into the future. Well, maintaining a global system, maintaining a global order requires three things. First of all, it requires a political culture that is interested in that system. Now, I would argue that the Americans lost that political culture long before Trump became president in 2016. But with the storming of the Capitol complex this January 6th, the US doesn't even have a political culture right now. So until the Americans can knit their culture back together, the Americans are simply incapable of having a foreign policy that's more than perfunctory. Now let's assume for the moment that President Joe Biden is the guy, and that he can do this. He can get us all back on the same side and lead us out into the world. How long do you think that's going to take him? A month? His whole term? More time than he has? You know, this is a decade-long cultural transformation. We're done, at least for now. The second thing that you would need is a global military footprint to enforce the.
All right. Well, let's have this quick conversation about, what really is going on with the United States as a whole right now. All right. So we are all operating off of a system that no longer works. You oftentimes hear about the coal miners in West Virginia who are losing their jobs, or, individuals who are oil workers, who lost their jobs, or pipeline workers who lost their jobs. But then you see BLM and Antifa out here in the streets, rioting and protesting. And then you have this Capitol riot. The truth of the matter is, all right, it was only 6,000 people who really showed up at the Capitol, as far as I'm concerned. That's a very small portion of our population, as far as anything's really understood. The problem is jobs, all right? And the rest of the world fully understands, well, actually, places like China fully understands the ideology that if you stand here and chase full employment, right? If you make sure everybody has a job, they don't, end up having the time to be able to protest as a whole. And that's an important ideology to have. That's something that you have to understand as you're planning your government, as you're planning your government structures, as you're planning your financial system, as you're standing here setting the market. The most important thing to do is to make sure that individuals have the ability to feed themselves, because when they don't, they'll end up protesting and rioting and having massive problems, because that means the system isn't working for the regular citizen as a whole, right? And this is the problem that we're having right now. The system is not working for the average citizens as a whole, all right? And the vast majority of work that has been created over the past 10, 20 years has been garbage, all right? It has been service sector bullshit that nobody wants to do. And you go, oh man, these jobs are better than working at a mill, they're better than working at whatever, a foundry, or working in a mine. They're really not. There is, and I'm teaching this to a lot of y'all as you're moving more toward doing physical labor and things of this nature. And like Dip actually just sent me a message about this the other day. He said, he's been doing construction work and using his body to earn a living. And, he's like, this is so much more fulfilling than anything I've ever done in my life. Right. And TK Mao has the same feeling, and Neffel has the same feeling. And as men, you will all have the same feeling. The moment you actually start really working and earning a living and you feel like you're earning it, you become more fulfilled as a human being. It's just part of life. It's in our nature, right? Because the vast majority of human nature has been either subsistence farming, sorry, right? Or it has been standing here, hunting and gathering, right? And either way it goes, these are all jobs that require, and that's what it was. It was a job that required you to use the full strength of your body to be able to provide for your family. And it was a direct link inside of your brain between you sitting here, exerting yourself, and your family eating. And that's an important ideology, or even you eating, That's an important ideology to have. And that's something that you have to fulfill as a human being. So we need to understand that, as people, we will always have this mentality with us because it's part of the human experience. All right, let's keep rocking and rolling though. Oh wait, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I'm sorry. Let me finish that thought pattern up. Right. The important part of this is that when you don't have these decent, sustaining jobs, and that's the other part of this is these service sector jobs don't pay enough for you to sustain yourself, and wages haven't been rising to keep up with the cost of basic housing costs. Right, which is the very simple part of this. Like you go to work to be able to afford a place to live. Like that's simple, right? That's how the entire system is supposed to be set up. When you have houses that cost $400,000 on average, and your base pay, on average, the average take home pay, like go away from, the average, like the average household's $56,000, right? But the average take home pay after taxes is 38. That's a bit of an issue. You're going to end up having stresses and problems inside of your system. And a lot of this has to do with the civil rights and immigration policies that we passed back in the 60s and 70s that have directly affected what's going on right now in our system. Because when you add in more people into the workforce, you end up driving down labor, which was the problem with capitalism 2.0, because you ended up having everybody standing here, the capital in a system, right? The individuals that invest didn't want to invest because there was no return on their investment because inflation, due to the fact that inflation is directly tied to, wages, right? Which is something that a lot of people don't understand. Like, oh, you just print money and then you get inflation. That's not how this works. You print money, you get asset bubbles, but not inflation, right? Inflation actually comes from individuals being able to afford to buy stuff because inflation comes from demand. And you only had demand if individuals had the wage growth to be able to sustain ability to be able to buy things. And so that's what actually causes inflation. That's why you're not having inflation across most of the Western world. That's why you're having, oh man, we're trying to reach inflation targets and they're printing money like it's going out of style and inflation is not happening. It's because wages aren't growing because we keep bringing in more immigrants to, dilute the labor pool, and you end up having individuals stand here and then you have welfare as well, right? Which, actually makes individuals poor as a whole, because when you give out welfare, it's a sustained amount of money. You're not having any growth. All of this ends up causing you not to have any inflation inside of the system. The problem is you're not having wage growth, and when you don't have wage growth, you're not going to end up having, growth inside of the system. And by the way, I hope y'all like my background. You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought it was pimping yesterday. I was out at the river, and we took some video. Let's keep rocking though.
The peace to patrol the global waterways. This is total American troops stationed abroad since World War II. It's been trending down for decades. That ship has sailed, literally. Americans haven't simply decided to leave. Americans have already left. The security underpinnings of the global order are already gone. And what is left is simply running on inertia. And the third thing that you would need to maintain a global system is global economic interests. And Americans have never had that. We have a continental economy, and if we had invested that economy into the wider world, then the global order would not have been a bribe. We would have just been another empire. Now, check out India. India never joined the global order, and so it never gained full access to the advantages of the order in capital.
That's important to understand, too, is that the United States as a percentage of GDP, like the amount of stuff that we import, right, is, extremely low, right? Like extremely, extremely low. So it's something like 12% of our GDP is tied up in exports, right? And that's the amount of money that is actually generated by the U.S. that's sent back out, right, and exported to other countries. Here's the thing, though. Half of that is Mexico. Another 30% is Canada. So in the end of the day, it's only like 3% of our entire GDP is tied to exports. We're the least involved country in the world next to like Azerbaijan. It's some ridiculous thing. Or Burkina Faso or whatever, right? These countries that are completely landlocked and have no ability to do trade with the rest of the world. This is something that individuals have no idea about, and something that we have to, start talking about and having these conversations about as a whole.
In industry and technology. Economically, it is this decision not to join the global system that is the root of India's development lag. It was a choice. And culturally, It is this decision not to join the global order that is the root of Indians' inferiority complex, because everyone that Indians compare themselves to did join the order. But the order is now collapsing. And anyone who adapted themselves to benefit, for example, China, now has a lot to lose. But India? Sure. In India not joining, India lost an opportunity to rise. But in not joining, India is not condemned to fall with the rest. So that's our first big point. The structural issues that created the world that we understand, they're gone. And for India, that's fine, because India never joined that world. Next up, let's talk demographics. Now, what we've got here is a standard demographic profile. Children at the bottom, young adults, mature adults, retirees at the top, men on one side, women on the other. This is Mexico, and this is what we call a consumption-led system. Because anytime you have a lot of people below roughly age 40, it's all about the spending on kids, on cars, on homes, on higher education. It's what drives a modern system. Now, when American political and business leaders look at a demography like Mexico, we really like what we see. All those young people are relatively new into the workforce. They're relatively low value add. So that Mexicans excel at low and mid-skilled manufacturing and assembly. That's not what Americans do. Americans do the high end. We do the design. So the propensity for integration of these systems is huge. Second, all those young Mexicans consume a lot of products. So Mexico became America's largest trading partner in calendar year 2019, and it's a position they're going to maintain for pretty much the rest of our lives. This is a partner. This is not. The Koreans had a baby bust 40 years ago that they never recovered from. So they now have a lot of people in their 50s. Now, those folks have been at their jobs for literally decades, very skilled, very high value added, and going head to head with the American workforce. In addition, not a lot of Koreans in their 20s and 30s. So the Koreans have to export all that product. America will never have a trade surplus with the Koreans. Now, between approximately 1980 and 2015, the world was kind of in this beautiful demographic moment. All of the world's economies were either consumption or export led. Here's a number of them in the year 2000. More or less a perfect balance. But 20 years later, we are all 20 years older, and the picture's changed. The global demographic of high consumption has peaked, and it only can go down from here. As to the export-led economies, they're aging into mass retirement. The year 2022 is the year that most of the advanced world shifts into kind of a post-growth system. Now, in the United States, Americans are kind of a partial exception. And the generation that matters the most are our baby boomers. Now, by some measures, the American baby boomer cadre is just like the baby boomer cadre everywhere else. World War II happened.
I'll let you know, remember, this is India recording this, so, there's going to be parts of this that are just going to be fucked up. It's not on my side for once. Legit, I figured out a way to make my OBS work properly for a little bit, And so, yeah, but I don't know if you noticed that. I know, I got everything kind of, faded out because I wanted the background to come through a little bit on my shit because I think it looks really nice. But, yeah. All these countries legitimately are terminal demographies at this point. Almost everybody is, short of us and Mexico. And us without immigration, we are a terminal demography as well. That's important to understand too.
The soldiers came home, they got married, they built lives for themselves, they had lots of children. Those children are the baby boomers. And there is a boomer cadre in Japan, in the United States, in China, in Germany, in the UK, pretty much throughout the world. Anyone who participated in the war in mass. Now, as you age, the way you invest evolves. So when you're 35, you invest a very small sliver of a very small income for the future. When you're 55, you invest a much larger wedge of a much larger income. And then when you're 64 and 3/4, every spare cent that you have, you put away for the future. So you would generate more and more capital at a higher and higher velocity. And as you near retirement, you become a little desperate to get that last little bit of income. So you start putting this huge amount of money into projects that when you were younger might not have made sense. So municipal bonds give way to foreign bonds, give way to foreign stocks. American investments give way to European investments, give way to Indian investments. The capital inflow from the world's boomer cadre is the single largest reason for India's growth surge for the past decade. And it's almost over because in calendar year 2022, the majority of the world's baby boomers, Americans included, move into mass retirement. And when that happens, all of those far-reaching investments get liquidated. And it goes back into the most secure investments you can have, such as American government treasury bills and even cash. Because once you retire, you never add to your stack of investments. So the whole world right now is in its biggest capital glut ever.
All right. So I hope y'all heard exactly what he just said, because this is an important mentality to understand. Understand something. Over the next year, we're going to end up having a massive problem with our markets, and they're going to end up fucking crashing unless, and I'll be honest with you, I don't see a way the fuck out of it. Legit. I just don't know. I don't see a way out. Like I'm like, it has to crash. There's no way the feds can print enough money to offset this in the end of the day. Legit, like, there's just not enough. I'm not sure. Legit. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and so next year, net short positions would be where to be at, I think. As far as things are really concerned, that's what I'm going to do. Right now, I'm working on growth. But next year, just all net short positions. Like in crypto, I don't know how crypto is going to work, because, like, without cheap capital, I don't know how we continue to have these booms in cryptocurrencies or any type of stocks as far as shit's concerned. Because what happens when you no longer have individuals in the workforce, and you're going to end up having wages go up? Like, there's no choice. Wages have to increase, and jobs have to open at these places for, the younger generations. And you're going to end up having increased wages with with less amounts of capital flows due to retirements. Like, it's going to be a giant. Next year is going to be most definitely one of the most interesting years that we've ever seen.
And it's over next year. In that, American boomers are just like everybody else. But American boomers did one thing that no one else did. They had kids. And the American millennials are unique in that they're really the only ones out there. There aren't Japanese or German or Italian millennials. So they are providing the ballast for our consumption system today, and they will be investing tomorrow. But for the rest of the world, it's a very different picture. Let me give you an idea of the scale. What I've done here is I've stacked up the consumption-led economies in the world today. This is all of them. And this is what they'll look, assuming 0% economic growth, which I realize is not realistic, but we've got to start somewhere. Here's where they will be in 2030. Here's the world's the world's export-led systems. They're aging out. They disappear as a class. Now, today, we only have one post-growth economy. That's Japan. They've already aged into mass retirement. But if you fast forward 10 years and look at the demographics, like, folks, this is already over. Consumption has already peaked. Production is peaking right now. Global capital supplies peak this year. None of them will return in our lifetime. You want to grow some more 40-year-olds? It takes 40 years. And all of this was before coronavirus. Coronavirus has driven all the consumption-led systems offline and into recession at the same time. So if you're an exporting nation, it really doesn't matter if you can beat the virus, because you have no one to sell to. Let's look at the comparison that everyone in India loves to make. Now here we've got India and China in the year 2000. But as we all know, the
For just $67, you can make as many videos as you want.
Chinese have a one-child policy, so you fast forward that today, and China has now the world's fastest aging demography. Best case scenario, assuming nothing else goes wrong, in the year 2100, there'll be fewer than half as many Chinese as there are today. In calendar year 2020, the Chinese birth rate collapsed, dropped by almost a quarter. And remember, it takes 9 months to have a kid. That means the birth rate in 2020 reflected 2019 conditions. They haven't had their coronavirus crash yet. Now look at India today. It's aging too. India might be resistant to deglobalization, but it's urbanized right alongside everyone else. India's birth rate began to contract 25 years ago, and that contraction sharply accelerated a decade ago. That means India in 2021 is aging at a similar rate to what China aged at back in 1980. That would suggest, in the worst case scenario, India still has 40 years of demographic dividends to reap. That's great. So that's our second big point. India faces little of the demographic pressure that plagues not just China, but most of the world. Now, that doesn't mean that there are no clouds in these silver linings. India has the world's worst sex imbalance. In 2030, there will be 50 million surplus men under 45, concentrated in the Hindu belt. That is a social and a political stability issue. If Indian women today think that there's issues in Indian gender relations now, I mean, look out. In consumption-based systems, having half your population exist is, in essence, a lower caste, has implications for technological progress, investment capacity, and, of course, consumption. Let me put that into a little bit more context. On the left, we are looking at population density. On the right, we're looking at per capita income. So on the left, the red and the orange are the particularly densely populated regions, while blue and green are less dense. On the right, the red and orange are the poorer regions, while the blue and green are the wealthier ones in per capita terms. There's a moderately strong correlation between population density and personal economic performance, particularly in the Hindu belt. Now, I'm not telling you anything that you haven't heard before here. For India, this contest between population and prosperity has always been an issue. My point is that in a world in which global capital supplies are about to collapse, this disconnect is going to sharpen. It will not go away. But at least it's a problem that is a familiar one. It isn't like India is going to be struggling with the collapse of a trade-based model or a consumption-based model or an export-based.
All right, well, let's talk about this real quick, because legitimately he just brought up the gender imbalance inside of the system. So with India, all right, having a massive gender imbalance between males and females, and he sat there and he said having females exist at a lower caste and not having the same rights as dudes holds you back technologically, holds you back financially, they hold you back, you know what I'm saying, in your ability to grow your economy. Understand something, all right? These individuals, all right, they want you to put females in the same level as dudes in your society because they go, it's good for your economy because it can drive down wages. And, you know what I'm saying, the more individuals that you have taking out loans is better for the banking industry. The more people you have standing here working, right, at a lower rate, because when you have females inside of the workforce, you don't have dudes needed to pick up heavy shit. That means you have technological advancement inside of your entire economic system or inside of your workforce, which means that you can charge less for labor because your labor is no longer as largely valid as it was before. This is an important mentality to understand. Let's keep rocking though.
Based model or a capital intensive model. The problems India will have are the problems India already knows. You have methods for dealing with them. They're not perfect, but at least your basic understanding of your domestic economy is not going to change. It's the devil you know. The devil China knows is a disaster. I can give a presentation for 3 hours about how China is going to be a failed state and not exist in a decade, but this is really the one that matters the most. It's the islands off the coast, Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore. The Chinese call it the first island chain. And there is no period in the long history of the Han people in which China has been able to economically interact with the lands beyond the chain ever, except right now, under the American-led order. Because the basic tenet of the order is that the Americans force everyone to be on the same side and no one interferes with anyone else's economic trade. If the Americans leave, that ends. China is only successful because the Americans are enabling it to be. But the Americans are getting out of that business. Now, there are two countries that theoretically could take America's place and enable China's future success, and they are Japan and India. What we've got here is a map that shows all the energy flows that go into China. Now, 80% of China's oil is imported. 85% of that flows by India. Now, Japan's navy is fully blue water, so it can interdict shipping to and from China nearly anywhere. Japan's navy has the range to reach the Persian Gulf, where most of this crude comes from. But what Japan cannot do is reach the Gulf if the path is hostile, and that is where India comes in. Not only can India reach the Gulf by itself now, India can interdict anyone attempting to approach the Gulf from the east. So that's the third big point. No one in East Asia can access the Persian Gulf without India's express sign-off. India is the most important country in determining whether China will survive the next few decades. It's entirely up to you. And this all might be happening sooner than you think. First of all, we are likely to have an energy crisis in the next few months. Now, you may remember back during the Obama administration, the Americans and the Iranians cut a deal where Iran would cancel its nuclear program if in exchange it was rehabilitated. There were a lot of Americans who thought that deal was bad. Trump was one of them. And Donald Trump canceled the deal and applied a maximum pressure campaign to destroy the Iranian economy, which has been broadly successful. Now, under the new president, Biden, the talk is whether or not that deal is going to be revised. It's not, because the circumstances have changed. The Iranians are kind of over a barrel right now, and the Americans, if there is going to be a new deal, they want a much stricter one that restricts Iranian policies. To that end, the Iranians realize they don't have anything to trade, so they've gone out to try to establish new chits. So around New Year's, they started hijacking ships in the Gulf, specifically a South Korean chemicals tanker, thinking that that would get the Americans' attention. It didn't. Trump did nothing. Biden did nothing. We don't care. Because of the shale revolution, we don't care about global energy markets. So expect the Iranians to kind of up the ante and grab bigger and bigger ships in order to get people's attention. That obviously has consequences for energy shipments. Second, the Americans have had a sharp falling out with the Russians over everything from cyber crime to cyber stalking to election interference to general propaganda. But because the Americans don't care about energy anymore, the Americans are preparing a series of sanctions against Russian energy exports. So now all of a sudden we have a potential for an energy crisis both in the Persian Gulf and in the former Soviet space. And losing trans-Suez shipments this week has certainly not helped. This can all blow up very quickly, and the Americans are not going to be a guarantor of energy shipments. If anything, they're going to interfere with them. Then we've got American-Chinese relations. On his way out the door, Donald Trump rolled a couple of grenades into the bilateral relationship. He called what was going on in Xinjiang a genocide, because, it is. And he said that any American political leader, any American bureaucrat can visit Taiwan in their official capacity as an American representative. That's about that far from formal recognition. On his first day in office, President Biden reaffirmed both policies. In addition, he sent 2 aircraft carriers into the South China Sea to do military exercises within sight of the Chinese military bases there. We have new policies on Hong Kong. We have new policies on Tibet. The Biden administration has doubled down on all of the sanctions and tariffs that the Trump administration administered to China, including those on Huawei and CNOOC. And the Americans' new trade representative, Catherine Tai, that's the woman in the top left, she's Taiwanese. The Chinese perceive this as a full court press against their interests, and they are not wrong. On the Chinese side of the equation, they realize that their demography is sharply terminal. They realize that their export-led economic model is in danger.
All right, so here's the deal. I gotta I'm gonna have to stop this for the second and end up, making this a part 2 as far as things are concerned. Because, my FPS has been just straight crashing, legitimately. So, we're going to make this a second part. At the moment, I'm going to stop this and then, I'm going to continue on here in a little bit because I'll be honest, I don't think it, my computer's, just trying to melt down at the second. So, you know the deal. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll be back here in a little bit. Peace.